Welcome to another captivating interview with none other than radio legend Richard Syrett. Richard, a maestro of the mysterious, brings to the table an insatiable curiosity and a flair for the dramatic. His voice, a familiar beacon in the night since the early 90s, guides us through the shadowy corridors of the unknown and the unexplained. Whether he's probing the depths of conspiracy theories, unearthing the nuances of paranormal phenomena, or challenging the boundaries of scientific understanding, Richard does so with a mix of earnest inquiry and engaging charisma, all while helming the legendary late-night paranormal fare of Coast AM. This case file, join the theorists as we journey into the strange, the speculative, and the sensational with the Sultan of Strange, Richard Syrett.
Welcome to Alien Theorists Theorizing Case File 302. I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
And today we have an absolute legend of broadcasting, podcasting, TV, the man, the myth, the legend, Richard Syrett, host of originally The Conspiracy Show, then Conspiracy Unlimited, now Strange Planet with Richard Syrett, YouTube, podcast, anywhere you can find him. Richard, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Now, if I'm such a legend, why did it take you to episode 302?
Hey, you asked your publicist. We reached out like 1,000 times, and she's
fired.
She stonewalled us. She stonewalled us.
Yeah.
We just got to the part where we can have you on the show that we are deemed worthy.
We had to do 300 episodes before we could reach out. That was the rule.
Nice recovery. Yeah. All right. But thank you very much. Sincerely, it's a pleasure to be here, guys. Thank you.
And just so you know, you're following a tax expert that says paying your credit card bill is a conspiracy. You don't have to do it. So
exciting.
Credit cards, mortgages, taxes, you name it. Get rid of them.
Stuff. The life insurance guy didn't show.
You've talked to like everyone in this field, but before we get to that, just if people aren't familiar with who you are, give us a quick rundown of how you got into this field and your career in broadcasting.
My career is such as it is. I started in talk radio, sort of behind the scenes. As my first job was actually as a call screener at a 50,000 watt station in Toronto, CFRB. It's one of these heritage stations that had been on the air since 1927, and I was working with this American who wrote for Esquire magazine. He was a Vietnam War correspondent. He was like a bloviator extraordinaire. His name was Ed Needham. And Canadians hated him because we have there's a bit of a nasty side. People think Canadians are so polite. We're not polite.
We're not.
We're passive aggressive. We're passive aggressive.
That's correct.
So, and he would hang the Stars and Stripes in his window overlooking like Yonge Street just to sort of egg people on. Anyway, I learned a lot from him, and I learned a lot from everyone there. The morning man, Wally Crowder, had been on the air for 60 years. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records. So, I mean, it was like the 27 Yankees working at CFRB in those days. So I learned from a lot of, actual legends. I couldn't carry their briefcase. So, and then around 2000, the program director, they were very good at, and I'm very appreciative of promoting from within. So they gave me a Sunday show, just, to see if I had the chops or whatever. And I couldn't do a lot of damage on a Sunday night. And I didn't start out doing like conspiracies and UFOs. It just kind of gradually creeped in. We used to subscribe to something called, it was radio prep, called Wireless Flash. And it would have, morning guys would use this, and it would have, celebrity birthdays and your horoscopes. And then it would have some crazy interviews. And
right.
There was one there for a Loch Ness Monster Hunter. So I introduced that into the show. And then gradually it just kind of took over. And then 9/11 happened, and that changed everything. And then I just started dedicating a good chunk of the show. I was probably, not to brag, but I was probably one of the first, maybe the first, to start like on a 50,000 watt legacy radio station, questioning the official narrative and pulling on threads, and some of them just came loose and nothing happened, and some started to unravel things, and it was a pretty scary time too. So that was kind of my foray introduction into conspiracies, and then I went over to another radio station, and I was doing the same show Friday nights, and then I came back to CFRB. I worked there like on 4 separate occasions. And then I started doing that type of show Monday to Friday. Then in 2009, I got a call from the vice president of talk at Premier Radio Networks asking if I wanted to sit in for George Norrie. He was having I think the birthday dinner for his daughter. Yeah, that was like getting a call up to the Yankees, after riding the buses. Not that CFRB were the buses, but still, yeah. And so I did a fill-in. Yeah, I did a fill-in, and I didn't think I hit it out of the home run. I thought it was a serviceable, 4 hours for a first-timer. But they didn't call me back for 5 years. And I thought that, if they never call me back, that's fine. I can always tell my grandkids I guest hosted Coast to Coast. But I got the call from Lisa Lyon in January 2014, and I've been kind of a regular fill-in weekend guest host ever since. And I love it. I love the history of the station, Art Bell, of the show. I love the platform. I'm speaking to millions of people.
I was going to ask, like the reach of that show must be massive.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's just nuts. Because there's like Glenn Beck, and there's Dennis Prager, and then George Norrie. He's right in that that pantheon,
the top tier. Yeah, no doubt.
Well, there's just something about the atmosphere of just that show, just something that just generates just off the name alone, just Coast to Coast AM. You're just like,
hell yeah,
something about it. Just, it's just, I don't know. Yeah. It's nostalgia. And then all kinds of just, that is the authority on weird kind of like when you get,
yeah. And I used to stay up listening to Art Bell in the early to mid 90s. And I always, even, parsing the UFO stuff and all of that, just as a broadcaster and as a storyteller. I could have listened to him read from the telephone directory. He was that type, he had the royal jelly. He had that kind of a voice and that kind of a presentation. Never mind the content, which is, pretty cool as well. But just as a broadcaster, not too many better.
No doubt. Now, how often you're still doing that? Is it how often is your show on Coast to Coast now?
I do 3, sometimes 4 shows a month. So I did Friday, Saturday this past week. And so that's it for November. I don't have my December dates. I'm just waiting I get the email, and Lisa Lyon says, can you do this, 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 and this? And I say, yes, ma'am.
You can't say no.
Actually, I can.
He's reached the top. He can say no,
but I wouldn't. No, I genuinely look forward to it. I have a daily radio show Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. And I'm also very proud of that. But it becomes a grind because I'm talking about the news, and it's all bad.
Right.
And I'm for 2 hours, every day. So to do Coast to Coast, to me, it's kind of a respite from all of that stuff, because I don't do politics, and I don't do COVID, and I don't do, those are pretty well, that's the parameter right there. Other than that,
those are so not
it's a bit of an escape. Like it's a chance to,
It's like having sorbet in between, different dishes at a sumptuous meal, it's just a nice break, an escape.
Yeah, the world can be pretty negative on the mainstream, on that mainstream news wire, it's negative story after negative story.
Oh yeah. It's the apocalypse over and over again.
Every day.
Every day is the end of the world.
All day is the apocalypse. Yeah.
That's right.
Well then, so now you've had all these years of broadcasting, and you've talked to pretty much every journalist in the field. Let's start, because I know there's like a million things you could say, but let's give a few of like the cooler topics in UFO, like stuff you've heard people talk to you about that stuck with you.
That is a tall order.
Even if it's we'll narrow down something recent, and you'd be like, this is
well,
cool.
As you were saying that, I was actually going back to, this is funny. This was even before I was on the air. I was a producer, and I was producing a late night show, and it was my very first alien abductee. And she was from Northern Ontario, and I didn't know anything about the abduction phenomena or anything. And so she was sitting in the studio, live in the studio, and she claimed that after her abduction, she had all of these powers, if you will. And she could hold her breath underwater for like 3.5, 4 minutes. She couldn't do that before. And then she was like, she said she was practically impervious to pain. And then she started doing, one of those things with you put your hand on a table and you got the knife and you're going like this.
She was just hitting every finger.
Yeah, she was missing. She was going, whoops, I missed. See, and nothing. And it was just like, I was just a couple years out of community college. This was just a kind of a cool gig for me, producing late night radio. And it just blew my mind. I said, I got to do this. This is what I want to do. It might have been that very moment, actually, when I see a woman stabbing herself in the hand, claiming she was abducted by aliens.
Yeah. You're like, this is the ticket.
Yeah, this is my producing career right here. It's either going to make it or tank it.
That's my legacy.
It is always cool. Like I find, because we've talked to some experiencers and stuff, but there's we've gone to conventions and stuff where you get to meet them in person. Like we met Travis Walton and stuff. It's so much better when you meet these people in person, because you get for me personally, I either get a sense of like, okay, you know what, I find this person on my own judgment to be believable, or I'm like, this guy doesn't even come close to passing my sniff test. I don't believe a word he says anymore. Yeah. So it's always so cool, I find, talking to these people in person. So I'm super jealous that you get to do that in person in these in these kind of situations. Because
that doesn't happen very often. I mean, most of them. I mean, you guys probably know this better than anybody. It's podcasts, these discarnate voices, and that's most of my career is just discarnate voices. I mean, one of my best friends was this guy, R. Gary Patterson, who's a rock and roll historian, and he wrote some cool books about rock and the paranormal and strange coincidences. And for the first 15 years that we knew each other, I only knew him over the phone. It was this discarnate voice. And then I finally got to meet him. I only met him a couple of times before he died. And that's the way the business is. So it's a lot of,
Did that spawn? Because you had another show, the rock and roll, what was it called? Rock and Roll Conspiracy or Rock and Roll
Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone. Yeah. That was supposed to be a terrestrial radio show with R. Gary, and then he went and died on me.
Son of a bitch.
Prick.
You jerk.
Some people are so selfish.
Yeah.
The unmitigated gall. No, I know there's a story here, and I don't know if you want to get into this, but I've had 2 unexplained, like weird experiences, and this is like top of the heap with Gary. Do you want me to get into this?
Of course.
I've heard you explain it before, but I'd love for you to explain it on our show. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a pause right there, grab a beer, take a short break, and we'll be right back.
All right. So we were working on a terrestrial radio. We wanted to do like a syndicated show, combining our 2 loves, rock and roll and the paranormal. And originally it was going to be called The Spirit of Rock. And so I would say between 2015 and May of 2017, we were either on email or text, or what did they used to call that? Google Chat or something? I don't even remember. But
Meets, isn't that right?
Google Meets. Yeah, that's it.
MSN Messenger, is that the one?
No,
ICQ,
AOL. No, I'm such a dinosaur. Anyway, we were constantly in touch with each other, shooting ideas, and then we produced a promo. He was down in Knoxville, and I was in Toronto, and we put this really kick-ass presentation together. And then he had some stations in the Knoxville area in mind, and he was going to go pitch it. And then so this went on, like I said, for like a year and a half or more. Then I remember one night I'm at All Saints Greek Orthodox Church in the parking lot. It's a Wednesday night. my boys are attending Greek school. I'm waiting for them to come out. The phone rings. It's Gary. And he says, oh, we got a meeting. I got a meeting with this radio station on Monday. I said, oh, Gary, that's great. That's great. Man, this could be like our flagship station. You could do the show from there. I'll do it in Toronto. And then, maybe we can get some other stations on board. So that was the Wednesday. And then didn't hear from him Thursday. Then Friday night, he calls me. And we had the strangest conversation. And I remember wandering through the house with a phone to my ear, not really realizing why I was walking from one room to the other, not even conscious. All of us conscious of it. One minute I was in the basement sitting at my desk. The next minute I'm wandering through the living room thinking, how the hell did I get here? And Gary and I are talking. I wander through the kitchen. It's dark out. I remember my brother-in-law was visiting. He was sitting at the kitchen table talking to my wife. She watches me walk through the kitchen with the phone to my ear. And then, I don't know, I maybe end up back down in the basement. So he starts saying weird things like, Richard, you and I are a really big deal. I thought, what the hell where does that come from? And then I thought, oh, this is Gary being Gary. He's always trying to build us up. He's the raw guy, right? We're going to do this. We're a big deal. We can make this happen kind of thing. And then he said to me, you're a really cool father. I thought, okay, I'd like to think so. Where did that come from? And then he let me know that the reason he called was that the meeting that was supposed to happen on the Monday wasn't going to happen because Monday was Memorial Day. And I don't even remember if I followed that up with, has it been rescheduled or anything like that? But I do remember saying to him, oh, Memorial Day. When I think of Memorial Day in the U.S., I think of parades and I think of barbecues. Families get together, they have barbecues. I said, Gary, you can have a barbecue. The family getting together, you're going to have a barbecue. And for the first time ever in all the years I knew Gary, he got kind of curt with me. And he said, just like this, there'll be no barbecue. And I went, whoa, did I just step in something? Did I open an old wound or something? I just kind of backed off and said, okay, sorry. And I don't remember anything after that, except we said goodbye. So that was the Friday night, I think. Saturday, Friday night into Saturday morning, usually my lovely bride, I call her the Mighty Aphrodite, we listen to Coast, and we fall asleep listening to Coast. And but I fell asleep. I didn't hear any of it. And had I heard, I would have heard the news that Gary had passed away. Gary was a regular guest host.
Right.
Or not a guest host, a guest on Coast to Coast. And Dave Schrader was guest hosting that night, and I didn't hear it. So Saturday morning, I raced downstairs, go to the front porch, have my coffee, my regular routine, and I'm checking my emails. And then I get a Facebook message from Dave Schrader. Richard, in case you didn't hear the show last night, I know you and Gary were close. He passed away yesterday. I said, get out. Come on. I spoke to him last night. What do you want about? Anyway, I didn't reach out to Dave Schrader. I immediately called Gary on his cell phone, got his outgoing message. Come on, Gary, give me a call back. What is this? Bullshit. He didn't call back, obviously. It was true. Gary had died. Sometime I later learned around between 5 and 6 o'clock. Now, this is late May, and it's still light out. 5 or 6 o'clock. I remember distinctly it was dark. So after the shock wore off, I kept calling. I knew he lived in Olive Springs, I think it was, in Tennessee. I think it's called Olive Springs. Just a little town outside of Knoxville. There was only one funeral home there. I kept calling. Finally, they answered. Yes, there was a Rudolph Gary Patterson. That he was the deceased, and they gave me the funeral details. And I was devastated. I ran upstairs, and the Mighty Aphrodite took one look at my face, and she said, what's wrong? I said, Gary's dead. And she said, without me prompting her, and we hadn't talked about it, she said, you were talking to him last night, weren't you? I said, yeah. Yeah, I saw you on the phone in the kitchen, and I didn't want to bother you, but I figured, you two are always talking. It must have been him because nobody else likes me, so nobody else calls me. So anyway, I flew down to Knoxville, and Gary's laid out in his beautiful blue metallic casket, and he's got, I don't know what kind of guitar he played. He was a musician as well. Whether there was a Fender or a Stratocaster, I don't remember. Anyway, it was on a nice little stand in front of the casket, and there it was his brother, Michael, his older brother, sort of greeting people. And I went up, and my voice was shaking. I mean, I've been to a lot of funerals. By the time I was 20, I'd probably been a pallbearer like half a dozen times. But this, it hit me kind of hard. So I said, Michael, it's Richard. And, Richard from Toronto, thank you. I can't thank you enough for flying all this way. And Gary talked about you all the time. And I said, thank you. And I didn't want to mention anything about the phone call because I thought that was weird. It wasn't the time. But I was curious about that remark about the barbecue. And I said, first of all, Michael, when did he pass? And he said, it was around 5:00 on Friday. And I said, and what was it? Well, they think it was a heart attack. And he told me, how they found him and so forth. And I said, can I ask you something? I said, the last time I spoke to Gary, and I didn't tell him when, I said, I asked him if he was having a barbecue for Memorial Day. And he got kind of cross with me. Is there something, did I say something wrong? And Michael kind of tilted his head and he said, what? I said, well, he got kind of angry with me. I asked him if he was having a barbecue, and he said, there will be no barbecue. And his brother said, well, that's kind of weird because the day he died, he was driving around all afternoon looking for a new barbecue. He spent $500 and he spent the rest of the day putting it together on his back porch. There'll be no barbecue. Well, he was right. The other thing I forgot to mention is, so on my phone, I checked, on the recents when you go and you can see your phone. So there was a call on the Wednesday. Okay, that was Wednesday in the parking lot of All Saints Greek Orthodox Church. I remember that. And nobody called me on Thursday. I told you, nobody likes me. Friday, no calls. No incoming calls, no outgoing calls.
No.
And I thought, what the hell? Did I just imagine that whole thing? So
from the other side,
I'm not going to sit here and tell you I definitely got a phone call from the grave, and I don't know what the hell that was. But that was 2017, and I think about it all the time, and I'm still trying to figure it out, and I don't have any answers.
So no call log, but you specifically remember talking to him, and so does your wife.
Well, she saw me talking to somebody.
Right. She's assumed because you talk to him all the time.
Yeah. And I remember.
And like, it's weird. It's weird because you knew enough information that like with the barbecue thing that it like, they're like, okay, well, that kind of lines up to stuff that was going on with him that day. So it's like, if you kind of look at Occam's razor, you're like, sounds like you were talking to him before. Like what other options are there? It's so creepy. That's such a fascinating.
Yeah, it's like it was life altering. I have to be honest. It just, I talk to people that this stuff happens to all the time. None of that that's never happened to me before. Anything like that. I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen Bigfoot. That kind of shook me to my core.
It's unexplained, right?
So like after having that experience, like when you hear people's accounts and stuff, does it kind of change their accounts for you? Do you like, is it kind of like where you lean to like, okay, like I'm not saying you were a skeptic before or anything, but do you have like a new sense of like the possibilities are out there kind of thing?
Yeah, it gives me a greater affinity for them. It's not just, here I'm doing my job and I'm interviewing somebody and they're telling me about yet another, telephone call from the dead or seeing another ghost. Now it's I can identify. You can
empathize with them.
I can relate. Yeah, which is important. To have that relatability and that empathy and all of that.
That's wild. So what? So if you talk to like these other like these mediums and other supernatural experts, you can call them. What do they have any input or say on what you may have experienced?
Yeah, I shared the story with. Do you remember Rosemary Ellen Guiley?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember her from your show. You always had her on.
Yeah. She passed too. Maybe the next year or the year after. But I talked to her about it. Yeah, she just, that was Gary reaching out. And I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I'm a horrible Christian, but I do believe in the Bible, and it doesn't square with my biblical narrative. You know, it conflicts. You know, I'm conflicted by it.
Yeah, that's creepy because it kind of gives you the shivers, right?
Mm.
And that's not the only supernatural or kind of paranormal thing that's happened to you, right? You've also had another kind of experience.
Yes, much further back. This is the weird thing. I remember when I started, the year 2000 is when I sort of, for the first time, stepped behind the mic, had my own show, and people would ask me, "Oh, have you ever seen a UFO?" No, nothing like that has ever happened to me. Nothing ever happens to me. I had completely, for some reason, pushed this, suppressed it. You know, I guess that's part of my British waspy upbringing. You take all of your emotions and you just squeeze them and, you know, repression until they become just a cold, hard diamond. But anyway, too much information?
Not at all.
So 1986 on New Year's Eve, my father passed away, and he had heart disease. And I was home from school, university, Christmas break. And a few days later, maybe January 3rd or 4th, I think it was, we laid him to rest. We buried him. And we were all back at my mom's house. And I was sleeping in my old bedroom down in the basement, in the rec room, as we used to call it. And my siblings were all in the room adjacent to the bedroom. And I remember they were watching Saturday Night Live. And I fell asleep to them, watching or listening Saturday Night Live. And then I woke up and it was just dead silence. So I figured, okay, it's late. Everyone's gone home or gone to bed or whatever. And I had my back to the bedroom door and I was facing the wall. And I know it's a cliche, but it's true. Like the hackles on the back of my neck, you know, and the tingling up and down the spine, hairs on my arms, the whole thing. And I felt there's someone in the room. So I rolled over, and even though it's pitch black and I'm looking towards where the door is, and I see a shape coming through the door, and I'm doing this, like rubbing my eyes, and all cards on the table, everyone in the family, we were all taking a mild sedative, which is typical. When someone in the family passes, the doctor will prescribe a mild sedative to help us sleep and so forth. So I'll put that out there. Yes, I was on a mild sedative. Anyway, I kept rubbing my eyes and saying, "What the heck is that?" And the weird thing was, it had this sort of this translucence, or it was something in the chest that was kind of glowing. And then I remembered I had this University of Victoria sweatshirt, and it had an insignia on it, and it kind of glowed in the dark. And I thought that's what it was. And I thought, well, who's wearing my sweatshirt? And the next thing I thought, because it was a fairly diminutive figure coming through the door, I thought that's my mom, who was, she was like 4'11" in stocking feet. I said, "Mom," I called out. Nothing, "Mom." And then it just started moving closer to the bed. And then I started doing this, right? Like waving my hands, and they're going right through it. And okay, this is just batshit crazy. So then I figured I'm dreaming. So I looked over to my left where my dresser was, expecting to see my clock radio because I want to see what time it is. Now, here's my reasoning. I could be wrong, but if I was dreaming, the clock radio probably would have been there. I looked, it wasn't there. And I realized, oh, it's back at the dorm in university. I'm home on Christmas break. I took the clock radio. It's back at the University of Wilfrid Laurier. It wasn't there. Am I dreaming? I don't know. Anyway, I lost sight of it for a moment. It was gone. I thought, okay, I'm just going to put my head back down and I'm going to close my eyes and then I'm going to open them and this is all going to go away. When I open my eyes, I'm looking up into its face and it is floating parallel to me, its head aligned with my head and its feet aligned with my feet. And it's just like right above me. And I look into the face and it's me. Like my doppelganger. And so I go like this again, I'm waving and it just shrinks into, I don't know, like a speck. And then it's like it got sucked into the corner of the room. It just went like that. And it was gone. And I never told anybody about that, probably for 20 years. Till one day, my brother-in-law, who was very close to my dad, he was driving me somewhere. And for some reason, he just started telling me, he says, do you know the day your dad died? I was driving home he taught at a college, community college. I pulled out of the parking lot and I knew your dad was in the back seat. And I turned around and I was telling your dad, go away. Why are you here? Why are you bothering me? You've got, why aren't you with your children? Why are you here? And then I told him what happened to me, 20 years earlier. And then it's bizarre because, another few years before that, before I finally told him, I had completely forgotten about it. How can you forget something like that?
It's weird. You've seen like a astral projection of yourself from the future, or what do you? What do you
I did a little reading on doppelgangers. People will report seeing them sometimes when they're under great stress. So I don't know. Maybe it's what did Carl Jung talk about? Like projecting. You have something that's in your mind, some artifact, some archetype, and if it, you project it outwards and it becomes sort of reality.
Right.
I don't know.
What's going to happen later, sometime in your life down the road, you're going to have some sort of out of body experience and you're going to find yourself floating over yourself in bed and you're going to go have this big eureka moment before you get sucked back into the corner.
That's right. That's it. Roll credits.
It's like the Interstellar, like you're pulling the string from the other side of the bookshelf.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I grew up at the house that we grew up in was legit haunted. Like I saw an apparition. Now, same thing. I was like 13 and someone opened the door and I thought it was my parents. And I was like, Mom, Dad, I've told this story on the show, so I'll kind of abbreviate it. I was like, Mom, Dad, is that you? Is that you? And then the door shut and I was like, that was weird. And then the door opened and then I was like, Scotty, like my brother, is that you? Door shut, door open. And we had like really, really tall doors and everyone in my family short.
Right.
And it's the only time in my life I didn't have control of my inner monologue. And my inner monologue said, stop, shut up, look how tall that thing is, sit quietly, you're in danger. And I just laid in bed and just had a stare off with this thing. And it just slowly shut the door. And then I jumped up, locked the door. I was like, It's like had a meltdown and all the doors were locked, nothing was in there. But like we used to hear ghost footprints and stuff. But like ever since then, when people tell me these stories and they go like, you get this feeling, I'm like, man, that I've never ever had anything else where it's like in my chest everywhere, this heightened sense of like something's wrong. So it's like it's when you tell that story, that's what it kind of brings me back to. I'm like, oh man, I remember that feeling of like and it sticks with you. Like when you start to remember it, you're like, oh, I can remember that feeling. That's
genuine. That's chilling and frightening. I mean, although I mentioned the hackles and all that, I was confused. And then at the end of it, I was just like in awe. It's just like, wow, what was that? I don't ever remember being frightened. And then the thing with Gary, I mean, it all sort of happened after, like the realization happened after the call. So I wasn't scared. It was just like, confused mainly, and I'm still confused. But that kind of stuff, that's just chilling, frightening.
Yeah, it was
scarring. That would scar me.
It was a scary house to grow up in. There's many times where you'd be sitting downstairs and the ghost footprints upstairs and be like, go upstairs and be like, oh, there's
this guy still sleeps with the lights on. All right.
Yeah,
I don't blame you.
No silhouettes here.
He's got motion sensors all over his room.
Everywhere. We got what are those, Dan? What are those things I always need to calibrate?
Oh, your EMFs?
Yeah, I got an EMF beside the bed all the time, just in case. Do a quick scan.
How about you, Zell and Dan?
I sit very much on the other side of the spectrum in terms of experiencing, because a lot of stories that we've been on here, doing this for a while, and like not as long as you, but we've been doing it for a while, and we hear a lot of stories. They're like, that sounds a lot like sleep paralysis, and I'm a person who has sleep paralysis like on the regular. Like it happens to me all the time, and at this point, it's just become just kind of like, oh well, this. Like I'm kind of stuck here for a minute.
Hey, I'm open to that. I'm open to that.
I was moving, Dan.
He was moving, Dan.
I don't have the answers. There may well be a prosaic explanation for what happened.
I mean, I'm always a believer that truth is stranger than fiction. There's so much in the world that could probably be explained by a lot of stuff, but I always find explanations for anything fascinating.
Well, get to work and help me out with this one.
I mean, I would go if we were discussing it, then I'd be like, yes, like the young explanation that yes, it was maybe paired with the disclosure that you were on a mild sedative at the time could have been a projection that you suffered a mental trauma at that point, and that your psyche was projecting a time that you were comfortable, that you had the sweatshirt, a younger version of yourself, a time that you were.
Holy shit! This guy's
like it's just something into a
couch trip here,
comforted state. Like
Dan's been writing a thesis on this for 4 years.
Oh, this is like a couch trip. I mean, how long have you hated your mother?
I've told Dan's going to bill you for that session, just so you know. And he bills.
Yeah, we'll see.
He is goddamn expensive too.
Time is up. We'll see you next week.
The only paranormal thing that ever happened to me was my now wife. She was living in this rental house, an old house from like the 40s. And she would told me like, it feels like someone sits on my bed at night and then gets off and leaves. And I was like, well, they had this really fat cat, a really big cat, like a 25-pound monster. I was like, it's got to be the cat. That's what in my mind I'm thinking. And one night I'm sleeping over, she's sleeping, and I made sure the door was closed and there was no cat in that room. And someone sat on the end of the bed. And when like it's a big person says, like the whole bed, like,
yeah,
for about 5 seconds, and then it released. I instantly jumped up, turned on the lights. No one's in there. There's no cat. There's no nothing. And the reason I was freaking out, because she had told me this has happened before, and I didn't believe her. And then it happened to me, and I was like, and she moved out of the house a week later. That was it. I mean,
all right, Dan, now do Zell.
Who was sitting on the bed, Dan?
Who was sitting on the bed? You see, he changes his air pressure now.
It was Mike Lindell who's doing a My Pillow.
What's on the bed? What's on the bed? What's on the bed? That only happened one time in that house only. She moved out. We moved into a different place and never again. So that house, something about that fucking house, man. Creepy.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, I've never had sleep paralysis. I've never had something that I couldn't be like, no, it's probably that. Like I've never seen a UFO either. I thought I'd seen Bigfoot once, but there might have been some psychedelics involved. I don't know. So no, never seen Bigfoot. Never seen anything I couldn't explain, even though we've heard, because we used to do a call-in show, like a coast to coast style show we called the Cosmic Channels. We might bring it back, but we did like 6 seasons, and we had heard tons of people like telling this crazy stories all the time about this random weird stuff that they couldn't explain, and we had no explanation either. So
it was just an avenue for people to call in and just share their stories. But yeah, it's always so cool to hear, especially those stories of the unknown. That's what fascinates me. Is like, I would say to Dan here, I in my monkey brain, when I hear a story, I go, that's crazy. Some ghosts. My brain never goes to some science. Never, not once in the history.
Not a single time.
Has it ever quickly leaned to some scientific answer? I go like, Ghost, baby. That's a ghost story if I ever heard one.
The scientific ending always is boring. All right. So
What are you talking about? No, it's not. It's not.
we also don't know.
Science is for nerds. All right. We've discussed that.
We also know like relatively little. Or young species. So maybe in 1,000 years, we know more. Right now, it's all these laws of physics and this and that, and we could try and explain it back and forth. But what if we start really uncover like some type of quantum realm, and we really know the quantum entanglement, and we really, it'd be cool to go like 1,000 years. Like, what do we know? What do we know now?
Have you guys interviewed Dr. Simeon Hein?
No.
He's a really cool guy because I think, Dan, you would like him a lot because he looks at the paranormal through the lens of like quantum mechanics, and he has, even though it is, you can't even call it a prosaic explanation because it involves things like relic neutrinos and coherent matter and things that go back to the Big Bang. And I don't understand. I got a 62 in grade 10 chemistry, and then I was out. But I mean, the way he explains it, he's brilliant, and he talks about all these incidents where Bigfoot is seen in proximity to things like ball lightning and.
Oh yeah, he does that dark matter monsters.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Should get that guy on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think I've heard the Bigfoot accompanying ball lightning. That's always cross sectioned into the like Bigfoot is an extraterrestrial or whatever. There's the quantum Bigfoot. Like I've heard that theory too, which is always kind of interesting.
His footsteps always disappear.
They just disappear in the thin air.
They don't. I've seen them. I've seen Bigfoot footprints up in there. I legit saw big feet footprints, and I sent them everywhere. I was like, this is fascinating.
You've been trying to perpetuate this hoax for a year now.
Yeah, everyone. No one believes me. I was hiking. There's berry bushes. There's boulder fields. Everything that we're told Bigfoot wants.
Check all the boxes.
And there was just these big bare footprints. Like a bare foot. And I was like, this is a big foot in the middle of nowhere.
It wasn't, I'll give you that. It was in the middle of nowhere, and those blackberry bushes are deadly.
They're deadly. Like to walk on, you'd be just dicing your feet up. I took pictures, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I took pictures, and I posted it to every like Bigfoot group far and wide. And the response I got was so ridiculed to the end. Everyone's like, you hoaxer, nerd, you fake. How dare you? And I was like, what? I was like, I thought this was the coolest thing ever. It had like the stride from footprint to footprint. I had to leap from one to the other. And I was like, this is insane. This is proof there's a giant ape out here. And no one cared. Everyone just made fun of me. All these like Bigfoot people on their Bigfoot like search groups and stuff. I was just like, hey, I joined the group just to share. I found footprints. Like, man,
it's because you didn't make a cast. You didn't make a cast of the footprint. That's why.
That's it. Where's the Plaster Paris cast? If you don't have Plaster Paris,
I know
with you to make the cast.
If you can't prove, you call
yourself a legit Bigfoot hunter.
If you can't Plaster Paris,
you got to prove
the carry with on you all the time.
Yeah, I'm going.
I always have Plaster Paris with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was inexperienced before, and now I know. So the next time,
mini pack in your backpack. Yep.
Listen, yeah, you're gonna have that, and then I'm gonna be rich because I'm gonna be selling those on eBay. You're gonna have be able to buy replicas of my plaster stone for your gardens everywhere. They're gonna be everywhere. Now that I know how to monetize this thing, just wait till I see the next one.
Well,
it's funny. It's funny how this kind of like, this community, it's so hot and cold that I find it's like, people are all in on something or they're all out on another. And like, there's infighting in different groups in the communities. You're like, holy, this like, can we all just enjoy these topics? You're like,
a lot of weird stuff out there.
Well, you're right. It's the same kind of division. Like you got two militant camps. It's the same with the UFO community, right? On one side, they're these benevolent, spiritually advanced, tall, beautiful Nordics that are here to show us home movies of climate change and
bring you love.
They're going to cure cancer and so forth. And then the others, they're prodding you and
the monarch's full of lizards
and making it.
Well, that's something I wanted to get your opinion on, because something that I've noticed, like in the last couple of years, I've just kind of been we go over so many UFO cases that you see this very distinct shift in the UFO abduction narrative that at some, right from, starting in the early 1940s, late 1930s, you have these abduction stories where it's like, yes, it is these all very like visually distinct UFO visitors. Like they've all have different suits. They've all got different appearances, physical appearances and this, and they come down here, talking about, this is where we live and we want you to join us on our internet. What's his name? The Integratron guy. His whole kind of solar, it wants you to join the solar alliance and all of these kinds of things. And, open to the bigger, better universe and these things. And then there is a shift somewhere, like, probably I want to say like the 80s or something right there, maybe even Betty and Barney Hill, but like there's still that part where more of the majority of the narratives start become this like they take on this sinister tone of like the hybridizations, the taking against your will and like this kinds of things. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? You've seen so many of these things and heard so many of these things. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to get taken off Whitley Strieber's Christmas card list here, I'm sure.
Don't worry.
We're already out.
We're already off.
Blackballed off
We're blacklisted for now.
Listen, what do I know? I'm just a big dumb guy. But again, I hope this isn't going to bore you, but I come back to my biblical narrative and I put everything through my faith filter. And if it doesn't fit with the narrative, then, it doesn't make sense to me why these interlopers would be traveling, millions and millions of light years to come here. And if they exist, I think they're interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. I truly believe we're alone in the universe. We're it. That's it. And God made this just for us. So the interdimensional aspect, it answers a lot of questions. How do they get here? How do they flit in and out of reality? How do they don't have to travel vast distances. I mean, they're in a hyperdimension. They could be literally right in front of our face. And also I think they're likely from the angelic realm. I think we're talking about fallen angels or and that might explain why some people have good experiences and other people have horrible experiences. Dan says, "I'm out."
It's an interesting concept because I'm like, I've always felt like, for me, when I'm thinking as not a religious person, I always lean to like some of the biblical stories and stuff that I know when I hear. In my head, I go like, to me, this kind of sounds like some extraterrestrial stuff. Like we're going here, like, people, Jesus having powers and stuff. I'm like, maybe that was the first hybrid, right? Like maybe that's where that comes from. And like that kind of stuff, that's where I kind of lean towards that kind of stuff. I'm like, maybe these stories are true and, passed down telephone style, but it's really talking about extraterrestrials, but we didn't have really ways to put it back in the day. We didn't understand enough where it was like that kind of fit it turned into religion where it was like maybe not necessarily that. That's where my brain always goes to. But my question, what I want to ask you is, as like a religious person, do you ever get pushback from that in this community? Because sometimes
it's not a popular opinion.
Yeah.
It's not a popular opinion.
It's like oil and fire with these kind of things sometimes. Oil and water? That's
oil and fire. Oil and fire, boom.
Yeah. Oil and fire, boom, explosion. Yeah, same thing, right?
Vinegar and bourbon. I get pushback, but even depending on, if you're at a UFO conference and you see like someone selling crystals, don't bring up the horrible alien abduction scenario because that's not going to go over well. You got to be able to read the room.
Right.
But then on top of that, if you bring any sort of religious aspect to it, being Christian isn't the most popular thing. I get pushback. I get pushback all the time.
Yeah, it all depends who you're talking to, who you ask. You say read the room. But yeah, as on Braden's point, I mean, a lot of stories in the Bible, if you say you would never experience the Bible at all, and then someone just read you the story and said, "What do you think?" You go, "I don't know. Maybe it's an alien, or like it's not. It's the being's not from here. It's a being of light from not from this world." Blah blah blah. Like, that sounds to me as alien.
Well, I guess technically speaking, Jesus was an extraterrestrial. Exactly. I mean, he wasn't from here.
I have that exact conversation with the Jehovah's Witnesses that come to my door. Actually,
they're so annoying.
I was trying to put up my Christmas lights the other day, and I had to have a full talk about World War III up on a ladder. And they're asking me if I'm hopeful for the end of World War III. I was like, I don't think it's actually World War III right now, and hopefully it doesn't get to that. And I am hopeful. It's still a peaceful time in human history. There's some major conflicts, yes, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, well, would you like this pamphlet? I was like, I'm up on a fucking 20-foot ladder, screaming down at the Jehovah's Witness, asking me these questions about the conflict in Israel. And I was like, I don't know, man. It's for Saturday. I'm just trying to put my lights up. All right, God's an alien. I yell down at him after, and then they leave. But yeah, a lot of the stories can be. You could say if you were not religious at all, but that he's not from this world. He's an extraterrestrial. He's an alien, interdimensional. He's still not from here. He's a extra dimensional being. Like,
you know, I do have a quick question for you as a Christian, because this is brought up and none of us are Christians. Why do we hide the eggs from Jesus?
You're going to hell.
Every year that's a kind of a running joke on the show. We said, all right, remember Jesus rises, so make sure to hide those eggs.
He would laugh. He would get that.
He'd think it's so funny.
Are all these characters based on like different religion though, like pagan religion or something, like the Christmas tree? And
well, Jesus didn't gather. You know, he didn't.
Yeah, it's not
around the Christmas tree. No, that's pagan. There's no question. That's pagan.
They kind of
a lot of pagan.
They just made good holidays, I feel like, and they're like, we'll use these ones.
Yeah, there was a lot of superimposing.
Like they don't go around
Christian religious.
They talk about the cross and stuff, but they don't give graphic details of the crucifixion of Christ on Christmas during Christmas. You know, it's like, oh, he died for us on the cross. It was very nice of him. But yeah, that was sure it was nice, but he was also mutilated and it was terrible and really, really bad, if you believe that. So we take the nice stories of Santa Claus and Easter Bunny and all this stuff. Like, well,
I don't believe it's not likely that he was born on Christmas Day. I mean,
I don't think so.
What were the shepherds watching over their lambs, you know, in the middle of winter? I don't think
it'd be freezing. Yeah. Especially out there.
Yeah.
Is it cold? Yeah, is it cold there in the winter? I don't know.
Yeah.
And yes,
it would be freezing.
Well,
Israel?
Remember when we
Bethlehem?
went to Las Vegas in January?
Mm-hmm.
It was, and we didn't bring pants. It sucked.
Well, it wasn't Canada cold.
It was Canada cold.
It wasn't Canada.
I think that's what the three wise men were saying too when they were there.
Yeah.
Why didn't we wear pants? It's cold. Who knew?
That's a true story. January, Las Vegas, we did a trip for this podcast, and I didn't bring any warm clothes or any cold clothes because I was like, "It's Vegas. It's warm, right?
It's out in the middle of the desert.
It snowed. It snowed while we were there. I had to buy a sweater. It sucked.
That sweater didn't fit either.
Yeah,
No, it did not.
Global warming my ass.
Could use a little global warming right now.
Yeah. And now, like, what are your favorite? What do you have, like a favorite, like, kind of call that you get, or favorite story? Like, is there paranormal or UFO? Like, what do you look forward to most?
We do open lines on Coast on Friday nights, and I always enjoy that because you never know who's listening, and occasionally you'll get, you know, someone who claims to be, I don't know, son of some ex-military guy who had top security clearance, and you know he'll tell you this yarn about dad coming home and diving right into the scotch because he had a pretty intense day at work, and he was, you know, at Groom Lake or something in an alien interrogation room, and and I mean, some of them tell it incredibly well, and you know, who am I to say that they didn't something like that? They didn't experience something, but they tell it with such conviction, and they seem incredibly authentic. So, what do you do with that?
Sit there and enjoy the ride, right?
Right.
Now, just a question on kind of logistics of how the show's done. Do you have someone that screens the calls for you? Like, so if they have someone that do you ever get like someone in the ear that's like, buckle up, we got one here?
I don't, because I'm doing the show remotely here in Thornhill and the studio is in LA. I don't have, actually they could get in my ear, but they don't, for the most part, unless I'm late for a break or something, or, they could.
So it's genuine. It's just you just picking up.
No, they do screen the calls, but they're just they tell me where they're calling from, their first name, and what they want to talk about. So they don't screen them heavily, unless they're like completely drunk, and occasionally one of those gets through as well. No, they don't screen heavily. I mean, Art Bell, that was kind of one of his trademarks, right? He didn't screen the calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were doing that for a while. One time, I think we had like the reincarnation of Hitler call in.
Cool.
That was
in the female version of Hitler, and that call ended in a weird way.
That was a wild story.
I think that was one of the only calls we actually said, we'll cut that one a little bit.
We can't have that release afterwards.
We'll cut that one in half till she went on the epic rant about, you could imagine,
something about Mein Kampf and getting real weird.
It went to
a special attachment to that.
It went dark real quick. Ooh, okay.
Reincarnation of Hitler.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Why not Eva Braun? Why did you decide it was Hitler, not Eva Braun? Well, she could come back. He could come back as a girl, I suppose.
We should open up Cosmic Channels one more time to get that girl back on and tell us the full story.
Yeah. From what I remember, like a story started with like, I hit my head. And then I realized that we're like, whoa. And then she's like, and then somehow I had Mein Kampf in the dashboard of my car. I never bought it. We're like, whoa, where is this going? Wow. And she hooked us the whole, we listened to it. She went on for like 15 minutes.
I was scared to hang up on her. I was scared to hang up on her. What happened? Does she know right? My studio's public. Like, she could probably find where I live.
Yeah. When she comes back into power, you're in big trouble.
I'm in big trouble.
No, Zill's got blonde hair, blue eyes. He's good.
I'd have to convert. Yeah. Be the only way out.
My favorite Hitler was comedian Dick Shawn. Have you seen The Producers? The original Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Zero Mostel is the producer, and Dick Shawn, very funny comedian, plays kind of a very hip Hitler, if you will. And he says to Eva Braun, "Eva, baby, why are you so upset with me? I gave you Czechoslovakia."
Yes. Okay. Yes, I remember. Yeah, very suave Hitler.
Oh, that Hitler.
But it's always that's I think the funnest thing about having any kind of call-in show is that you don't know what's coming.
Exactly. That's the beauty of live radio. That's the beauty of late night radio in particular.
Now, do you have I know your show has such a big audience. So do you get repeat callers that you're like, I know this guy? Like,
they have the regulars. Yeah. Cornelius and Mayat from New York City, Joe from Monterey, who comes on, and all of a sudden he's doing his own show. Yeah. Joe from Monterey comes on and he starts telling you, it doesn't matter. We could be talking about, I don't know, solar panels or something. And he'll come on and he'll start telling you about how he's teaching his clients to astral project. And he just like for 3 minutes, it's the Joe from Monterey show.
So how do you deal with those people? Like, they're like, you just let them come on, do their thing. Like, how do you deal with the repeat callers? Like, are they producers to your show? Or are they kind of just like a funny avenue for your show? Like, what's your opinion on it?
Well, it's kind of a different host try to deal with it differently. Some hosts don't want any regulars. I try not to rely on regulars too much because I think other people get tired of hearing the same voices all the time. But some regulars are great. They're full value. They come to play. They've got something, important or poignant or interesting to say on any given topic. But I kind of pick my spots. I don't like to rely on regulars, maybe one or two, per night, but that's about it. But I don't like to cut people off. People always assume that you're cutting someone off, but they don't understand, in this business, it's all about the clock. You are a slave to the clock, and you've got a hard out at 56 minutes after the hour. And if you don't hit that, it's going to sound stupid. Yeah. So you got to get out and you got to wrap it up. And sometimes you end up kind of, pushing people off the stage before you'd like to, but that's just the way it is. And people think that's, you're being rude. It's inevitable. You're going to get complaints.
The way the show works.
Yeah, that's radio.
Yeah, we didn't have that problem because we had no time limit, but we still kick people off.
That's the thing about podcasts. It's just, you could go 20 minutes, you could go 3 hours.
Well,
the biggest issue
sometimes we should have kicked people off, but we didn't. Yeah. Sometimes that was probably
the biggest issue I think we ran into is people someone would share, say, a dream they had, and we'd be like, "Wow, that's a cool dream." And then the next person would be like, you guys listening to dreams? Let me tell you about my dream. And then you'd have you'd have 6 calls in a row. And it's like, for us, it's like, cool dreams are cool, but they're dreams.
You dreamt it. Yeah.
A lot of the times you're like, that's a weird dream.
It's not, what else are you going to say?
Yeah. You're like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Dreams are weird. Next caller. Another dream. So we'd have to be like, no more dreams.
We ended up hiring the dream police, we called it, and we matched sirens and stuff. And then we'd be like, no, that's it. Sorry.
People would start a story and we're like, hold on a second. Were you awake here? They're like, well, not really yet, but don't lose. It wasn't a dream.
It was fun.
Yeah.
The dream, that was Cheap Trick, wasn't it?
Yeah. Dream police. Yeah.
The dream police.
I went out for drinks one time. True story. I was producing a TV show. We had, you guys remember Batman, the original TV series, and the Riddler was Frank Gorshin.
The 60s one?
Yeah.
With the bang.
Yeah.
Boom.
Frank Gorshin played the Riddler, and he was an incredible impressionist. So we had this TV show in Toronto, and we would fly people in. And so on one show, we had Frank Gorshin. So he came on and he did his thing. He talked about Batman and he did his impressions of Kirk Douglas and all that stuff. And then so he's sitting in the green room, and then in comes Cheap Trick, minus Bunny Carlos, who I think had left the band at that time, or he was anyway. So then we wrapped the show, and Frank Gorshin is we were way north of the downtown, so there was nothing to do for him to go back to the hotel. And so the guys from Cheap Trick asked the host and I, do you guys want to go out for a drink? So we said, sure. And Frank Gorshin says, can I tag along? So it's it was just so surreal, Frank Gorshin and Cheap Trick. So Frank Gorshin piles into the back of our car. John Oakley was the host. He had I don't know, it was a Ford Taurus or something. He had all his stinky hockey equipment in the back. And we had to get gas before we go to this bar. And Frank Gorshin says, I'll pump the gas. You guys go in and pay. And maybe, if you wouldn't mind giving me some water or something. So we go in, and there's Frank Gorshin pumping gas, and we're right next to the kiosk or whatever you call it. And the guy at the cash register is looking at us, and then he's looking at Frank Gorshin pumping the gas. And he looks back at us and he says, why is the Riddler pumping your gas?
Riddle me this, Batman.
That guy thought he was getting robbed for sure.
Yeah, he's like, do I need to turn on the bat signal? I call Commissioner Gordon.
Awesome. Hey, Richard, we're at that 1 hour mark that we told your publicist we'd keep you for. So if people want to go follow your show, follow all your stuff, tell them where to go.
All right. Strangeplanet.ca is the website, and you can subscribe to my podcast, Strange Planet, there. You can stream it from there. Also, it has my upcoming Coast to Coast dates. And then I have my daily show, which is nothing like Strange Planet. That's the Richard Syrett Show. And you can stream that, richardsyrettshow.com, or the podcasts are everywhere as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm everywhere.
He's everywhere. He's been around a long time. Legend, as we said. We really appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to take a short break. We're going to let Richard go. We're going to be back with After Hours for the Patreon supporters. For everyone else, we're going to see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
On the skies.